Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Nala's Journey. I'm Jackie, aka Nala.
And it's Nyasha, aka Jaja. And this is our first video together. Guess what we're going to be talking about today? What are we going to be talking about?
Movies.
We went to the movies. So we like to go to the movies, my mom and I. And we recently went and saw this movie called Women Talking. And it's actually based on real life events that happened in Bolivia from 2005 all the way to 2009, I believe. And it looks like it affected over 150 women, and they were from the ages of 5 to 65. So I'm looking at some notes here if you're wondering why I'm looking off the camera, because I honestly didn't know all of the backstory behind the movie. I just saw the name Women Talking, and I saw that it was in a grayscale film. Like, that's the vignette that they had the film in. It was a bluish grayish film style, and it interests me. So why did you want to see the movie?
Yeah, I saw just a snippet of it, of an advertisement of it, and I saw the grayscale. I didn't like that part of it, but I'm like, I saw just a snippet that it seemed like okay, it was about women and women being abused, and I'm like, well, that caught my attention.
Yeah, I like to, the reason I like to watch movies is I like to analyze them. I also like to have conversations about movies. And I think that Women Talking can facilitate a lot of good conversations that need to be had. So, without further ado, like I said, the gist of it is essentially it's a Mennonite community. So basically, it's a very religious community. It's a small knit community, and the women were waking up in a stupor. They were waking up in the morning in a stupor. They would have blood on their gown, and they were essentially being drugged and raped by men of their own community. And then they were gaslit into believing that they were being punished by the devil for not being pure or holy, or I forget the reasons why they were being punished, but that's what they were gaslit into believing.
Yeah, the whole story, let's say, and even though it was true, okay, I'm gonna call it what it was. The nightmare. It was just it was really torturous even to watch. It was really torturous. What these women went through actually in life.
Absolutely. So basically, we're setting up the storyline. So it's a small religious community, so therefore they would have a checks and balances system, and they would typically handle something like that on their own. However, all of the men were just kind of like pointing the finger, who did it. It's like a who done it, So essentially, one member of the village of the group basically saw a man attacking a woman in the night, and that person went and told the authorities, and then the authorities got involved. And once the authorities got involved, it seems that 8 men were actually sentenced to 25 years in prison for this act. So that's kind of the behind the scenes, like that's what the book kind of talks about. So we're going to talk about the actual film now. Now, the film itself is a little different from the book, because the book focuses on a male's perspective, versus I feel like the movie definitely gave the women a voice. What do you think?
I definitely believe the women had a voice in the movie, definitely. And it's about time, because apparently they went through this for how many years did you say?
Well, it seems like they went through this between 2005 and 2009. So a 4-year period of absolute torture, like my mom said. And, for all of this to be pushed down and swept under the rug, and for no one to have justice for all that time is really disheartening. And then to hear that the book, focuses on a narrator perspective, and the narrator happens to be a male, which we'll talk about, because from the movie, essentially, there's a member of the religious group that leaves and returns, and he also helps the women basically formulate a plan as to what they're going to do. So we are now to the main focal point of the movie, which was the barn. The barn is the place where the women had the discussion of the lifetime, essentially, because in this religious community, the women were not allowed to read or write. So think about how much of a handicap that is. So on top of that, you're being abused. You're not able to read and write. What type of freedom would you really have?
And they didn't have any freedom. They were abused in every sense of the word. They were abused, and the only voice they had was towards the end, when it was discovered, by another man, what was occurring to the women.
Correct.
That's when their voice became alive, let's say.
Correct.
And what I also found interesting, there are women, who are well in their 60s. So it seems like those women perhaps were abused all of their lives, perhaps all the way through their 60s. So can you imagine that? All of your life, you're being abused.
Correct. And on top of that, you weren't able to read and write. So how could you I'm trying to focus on the literacy skills because in the movie, again, you'll just have to watch it. But each character is so well developed. Each character, you can tell, is so stunted by not having access to literacy skills. The way that they're communicating, the way they're expressing their thoughts, you almost feel frustrated and angry. Whoever directed this movie did a great job with character selection, character development, and also the expressions that they had. And the way that they were able to, you really would have thought that these characters, that these actors were just illiterate for, majority of their life. And so it really puts into perspective how much literacy impacts your freedom and your ability to make sound decisions, or at least plan out your decisions, orate your decisions verbally, and have your ideas come across. If you're trying to make a plan, you have to be strategic. It's step by step. But if you haven't had a formal education, so it just kind of also shows back in the day how conversations were had on major problems in a community. All of the women sat down in this barn, and here's a man, he's taking the minutes, and they come up to three solutions. They can either stay and fight, they can either leave the community, or they can do absolutely nothing. And the whole movie, they're explaining what, should we stay? Should we do nothing? And even just down to writing the pros and cons, it is elementary level sentences. They're only able to put together 2 to 3 word sentences. And we're talking about adults, grown women, because also, like I said, all of the women in the colony it was a powwow essentially for them. And so the younger tweens, I say tweens as teenagers or younger than teenage years, they weren't really allowed to have a voice, but they were at least able to be in the presence of the meeting and to see how the decisions were going to be made. And I will say that, that was really heartbreaking, wasn't it? Mm-hmm, how they were only able to communicate in two words.
It was. What I found very interesting, the movie and the directors, they showed very clearly how each person was affected, how each person was traumatized, and the effects of trauma, that what trauma looked like for each person, because, and it's true to this day, trauma looks different on each person, but the movie did really well with that.
Yes, and we're not going to give any spoilers, but there is definitely from the beginning to the end, you really don't know how it's going to end. And those are the type of movies that I like. I don't like to be able to think my way through the movie as I'm watching it. I want to really be on the edge of my seat. I want to really feel like I'm learning about the character and feel like I'm really invested in the characters and their storylines. So I feel like this movie really did a great job of that. Did you have a favorite character? I don't really remember their names per se because it was so many. Again, we're watering this down. It was a whole community, so we're talking over 20 different women. That we had to remember this person's name and their own personality and their own quirks. Another interesting aspect. So we will share this. Hopefully, it's not too much of a spoiler, but the man that took the minutes of the meeting, he ends up getting a crush on one of the meeting attendees, and she's so much of a pioneer woman. She's like, if I get married, I will lose myself. That was one of my favorite quotes of the whole movie, don't you think?
Yeah.
If I get married, I will lose myself. Hello. But also just the fact that she was so much of an independent woman, and this man was willing to give her anything and everything. He was willing to, make her life easier. And she just was so independent. She refused to be that submissive. So I thought that was really interesting. And also it's a little frustrating because he kept here. Okay. So this is another point I wanted to mention. So, essentially the discussion really took place over the span of a day and a half, and they make a decision and they act on that decision. But the movie is at about 1 hour and 45 minutes. And so that discussion takes up, majority of the movie. You would have thought they had this discussion over a month. That's how it felt. That's how agonizing it was to watch them go back and forth. And then on top of that, generational differences. So some of the elders some of the elder women wanted to stay. Some of the younger women wanted to stay. And then, hearing each other's sides, it might sway your opinion. And it was so much to unpack in this movie. And like I said, we don't want to spoil it, but I'm so tempted to give you the ending.
Don't do it.
I won't. That's why I'm like,
do it.
I'm really trying to think of my words here, because I'm like, how do I say this without saying the ending?
That's right.
Let's see here. But you definitely leave with a sense of,
well, finally.
Yes, well, finally. So whatever decision you wanted them to make, you're just like, at least something was made. Because, like I said, the entire movie is just back and forth debate. And another aspect, most movies these days don't really have that much of a debate. We don't really get to see debates like that very often.
What I found interesting, they were debating, to me, on something that the average woman, wouldn't debate about.
Exactly.
We would just have a standing.
Okay.
There's things we would accept. Yes. There are things we would accept and other things we will not accept. So, debating. They were debating about this.
So, one of the decisions was, do we leave the men? Do we send the men away, or do we bring some of the boys with us? Because we're talking about young boys, but then they have to bring up the fact, well, at what age is a boy a threat to a woman? Because they were figuring out who did it, who was raping who, and who was drugging who. So everyone's in question, So people are having to think about leaving their children, leaving their uncles, their fathers, family members, friends, people you've grown up with, your community. So monumental decision that they had to make. Sort of to kind of wrap it up here, what would you give this rating? Let's say
I would say, well, first of all, it's hard for me to rate a movie like that, because I leave, and even not even before I even leave, I'm angered throughout the movie. Okay, I'm angered throughout the movie.
Absolutely.
So it's hard for me to rate a movie like that, because rating, typically you're saying, okay, yeah, it was really good, but how do I say the movie was really good, but the movie was based on abuse? Yeah. So that's my take on it.
That's a very good point, because I honestly, I want to say that it's a good movie, but what's good about it? The content matter is thought-provoking. Yes,
it is.
It's like I said, encouraging conversations, and we're telling stories, which is important, especially someone's lived experience. That's dramatic. That's very important. I'm wholeheartedly believe in that. But at what cost, because I also think about the victims, the survivors of this, what their families might be going through, knowing that this is hashed out for the whole world to see. I'm sure this was a problem this was a monumental historical event that took place that most people really wouldn't have known about if this movie didn't come out.
What country did you say that it was? This movie
Bolivia.
Bolivia. This happened in Bolivia. Okay.
So,
and it wasn't that long ago. You said like 2000.
or 2009. I was in
something like 2005 to 2009.
Yeah.
Maybe that's when it hit the headlines or
Basically.
something like that.
So
but remember, there were women in their 60s,
Correct.
who were still living in this community. So women were living under this abuse for all of their lives.
Yeah.
All of their lives. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I can't even fathom the amount of trauma. Multiple layers. I mean, talk about complex PTSD. Multiple layers of trauma, and how do you heal from that?
That's right.
That's why self-care is key.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Self-care is very important to us all, and that's what this channel is about. This is a knowledge journey, and we're big on self-care. We definitely are. Okay.
Yep. And so my mom has her self-care routine. I have my self-care routine. And we're bringing you along. We're showing you what we do to take care of ourselves and creative ways you can take care of yourself. So,
we like going to the movies, don't we?
Oh, and that's a self-care, taking care of yourself, spending time with yourself, spending time with your loved ones. Like I said, building healthy conversations. Here we are, two women talking.
Two different generations.
I tell corny jokes, so it was a type thing. But anyway, yes.
Two different
generations talking is what I was trying to say.
Two different generations, indulging in a movie. Having good, healthy conversations about a movie.
Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed this discussion about this movie, and I have so many other movies that I want to see. And if you guys enjoyed our discussion, like the video, maybe drop a comment. Is there any movie you want us to review, perhaps? I know that I want to see Puss in Boots. My mom probably doesn't want to go see that. I like animated movies. But I also like independent films, You
do.
So, just you'll never be bored over here, basically. So yeah, thanks so much for your time, guys, and go check out Women Talking. It's in theaters right now, and it's been in theaters since December, so hurry up, because who knows how much longer, before it's on pay-per-view or something like that, or comes to Netflix, who knows,
Okay. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time, guys. Listen, we will see you
again next time.
See you in the next video.
See you in the next video. Take care. Be well.